Hello, welcome to Let's Talk. Our session today, using the ASQ-3 and ASQ SE in Early Learning Quality Initiatives. I'm Debbie Mathias from the BUILD Initiative and the Director of the QRIS National Learning Network. Before we begin the session, I'd like to thank the Alliance for Early Success and other generous funders for making this learning community possible. We began this series for state quality administrators and leaders to support their essential work within states around early learning systems building. We intentionally keep the sessions small to invite conversation and sharing. We hope these calls enable us to illuminate challenges, innovation, and promising practices. Make sure to keep track of your ideas, questions, and examples for our talks. Either enter them in the chat box so we can discuss throughout the session, or raise your hand and engage in the conversation. First, a little bit of thinking about why we chose this session. The ASQ-3 and ASQ SE are developmental and behavioral screening measures designed for parents and other caregivers to complete. Now, a little bit about the information your colleagues shared from the survey you answered when you registered. First, we asked, is developmental screening required in licensing or quality initiatives in your state, or is it recommended as a best practice? As you might expect, we heard the full range of answers, from no, it's not required, to it is a recommended best practice, to yes, it's required, as it is in Head Start. Sometimes only the ASQ-3 is required, and the ASQ-SE is optional if further screening is indicated. And in some cases, some of you mentioned that it was required at different quality levels in the QRIS, or given points at different levels in your QRIS. We then asked states to describe how your state is using the ASQ or ASQ SE screening. Responses included, well, a few of the states mentioned the ASQ-3 was one of the tools made available in states, or that a few tools were permissible, but the ASQ was the one that the state provided professional development and technical assistance around. And sometimes a couple of you mentioned that you provided copies of the materials to regulated providers. One of you said it's part of the licensing requirement, and that actually insurance companies were promoting and ensuring compliance with the EPSDT. Supports included supports for the screening requirement or a best practice requirement, some of you mentioned, including implementation of the Help Me Grow initiative. Some of you also said you had an early childhood mental health consultant cadre or worked with early intervention around the referral part after the screening was completed. Some of the states gave free access to online ASQ and ASQ SE materials. When we asked, is the state using these tools across the sectors, such as child care, Head Start, home visiting, and also we asked if you were using it across systems like maternal health, early learning, and family supports. Mostly we got responses on this questions, and you ranged from no or an inconsistency in approach. Some of you said you were planning to figure this out and working with either other sector partners or other systems on figuring out unique child identifiers or technology platforms that you might use to make this work. A number of you mentioned cross-sector use is encouraged through, again, the Help Me Grow initiative in the state. And in particular, I'd like to mention Vermont here. Vermont CHIP has taken the lead in offering training and incorporating ASQ screening efforts into its Universal Developmental Screening Registry in the Help Me Grow work. Referrals were centrally collected and assigned primary case management based on a family's needs. Several of the states mentioned that professional development and technical assistance was coordinated, I thought this was interesting, regionally or by county or locally determined, rather than the state having a specific protocol around it. The professional development and technical assistance was not just the screening itself, but also about next steps and engaging with families. Again, Help Me Grow was mentioned as an asset here. I'd just like to take a moment and go over our agenda for the conversation today. We'll begin with some introductions and then have Liz Twombly give us an introduction to ASQ-3 and the ASQ SE-2. Then we have 3 states who will share their experiences. We have Michigan, Pennsylvania, and California with us today. And we thank them so much for volunteering to share. And then we'll have time for questions, thoughts, and ideas. And I really would like you to place questions and thoughts in the chat box. We will come back to these as the session goes on. And thank you for, because your comments and ideas and point of view really help to make a rich conversation. Now I'd like to introduce Liz Twombly. She's a senior researcher at the University of Oregon's Early Intervention Program. For the past 25 years, Liz has been involved in the research and development of the ASQ and ASQ SE screening tools. She's provided training and technical assistance across the nation and internationally on the development of effective screening systems and the use of parent-completed and caregiver-completed developmental and social-emotional tools. Liz, I'd like to thank you so much for being with us today and turn the program and session over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Debbie. It's really my pleasure to be here and to be able to reach out to the BUILD initiative and be able to share this information where folks can come back and access it at later points in time to really think through the use of these tools in early learning systems. I do think screening I think early learning can do a fantastic job of helping support families with these tools. I think the great relationship that early learning providers also have with families and parents just really helps support the accurate administration of this tool and really the usefulness of the tool both at home as well in those early learning environments where this information really can be used to support young kids' development. So I'm just going to give a quick introduction to the ASQ and ASQ SE, just a few quick points because I know the vast majority of you are probably super familiar with this tool or have done and are doing training yourself. But just to let you know, these are parent and or caregiver completed screening tools. When we say caregiver within the context of completing this tool too, we're really talking about primary caregivers as opposed to teachers. But I'm going to talk more about how teachers can work together with parents to gather this developmental and behavioral information to really make good follow-up decisions for kids. They are a series of 2 different series of questionnaires for children ages 1 month to 5.5 for the ASQ and up to 6 years for the social emotional version of the tool. And we are continuing to do ongoing research to look at the reliability and validity of these tools and how well they're doing in terms of really identifying kids at risk for developmental or social emotional delays. So why did we choose to really have parents be the reporters of their children's development? Diane Bricker, who was one of the first, instigators of this tool, the lead author, along with Jane Squires, just really had faith in Parent Report, as well as a lot of research to really support how accurate parents can be. But the other types of importance of Parent Report is to really create that expectation that parents are going to be involved in this journey of advocating and supporting their child's development. It conveys the value and importance of the parent's expertise in their understanding of their child, as well as, as Head Start really shares parents as their first teachers. It really, conveys the value of this from the first point of contact. And it also educates parents about their child's development. I know I've heard and had these own concerns myself when I was working as a preschool teacher many moons ago, but where sometimes parents have wonderful goals for their children, to write their names or to start to read, but it may be a little bit beyond where that child is developmentally. So it gets us on the same page, gets parents on the same page, and we can acknowledge that's a fantastic goal for your child. And right now, at this point in time, these are the types of developmental skills that are important for your child as they move towards that ability to read and write and do all these other things. And when we're talking about collaborating with families in our programs, that real collaboration involves the reciprocal sharing of information between parents and providers. And this provides that forum, that structure for parents to really be able to share at a deep level. This is a little bit, just a quick slide related to Parent Report, that family is the primary source of preparing children for school and life. That we, as early learning providers, really have an enormous amount of influence on young kids and can be a very supportive, protective factor for children that might be in difficult situations. But ultimately, the family is who is going to be with that child throughout the course of their life. And we really want to empower them at this point in time as well, so that they're prepared to support their child throughout. Children benefit when all the adults who care for them work together, so this provides a place to share information about a child and work together. And again, helps parents with that understanding of developmentally appropriate skills, as well as activities. What are supportive activities that kids can be doing at different ages? The ASQ, again, most of you are probably familiar with this, but the ASQ covers 5 important areas of development: communication, gross motor, fine motor, problem solving is our cognitive area, and personal social is a combination of both social skills as well as self-help skills. So skills children learn to help feed and take care of their bodies and get dressed, those types of things. And that tool was the first tool that was developed a while back. And while this tool was being shared out and about, folks really loved the concept of using parents to share information about their child's development, but they were really saying, we're missing an important point, which is behavior or social emotional development, those concerns that really keep parents up at night. As some researchers say, the things that they really worry about when their children are young. And so the social emotional version of the tool came a little later. So there are 2 separate questionnaires to look at a child's development. The tools are very flexible, so there's many different methods that you can use to complete these tools: mail out, face-to-face. You can do it over the telephone. You can do it online. Parents, again, the very first method for which it was used here in Oregon was just to mail out to parents of premature babies just to check on their development. So that was the very initial use of this tool, and then folks started to use it in all sorts of different ways and in all sorts of different settings. So the second part here. We have a lot of early learning providers who are using it, but also our pediatricians and doctors. It's being used widely in home visiting programs, child welfare, early intervention, parent support. All those types of programs have found a way to utilize this tool within those settings. One of the challenges in how flexible this tool can be is that it makes it a challenge in terms of administration for different settings. Each one of those methods that I was talking about before requires different considerations to really complete the tool accurately. So for example, if you want to mail it to parents, or if you want to do it via a telephone interview, we really suggest that you mail it to parents first, that they have some opportunity to observe those behaviors, and they also have the tool in front of them so they can see the illustrations. So that's one example of a consideration that needs to be considered prior, so that the administration is actually accurate and valid. The settings also require really different considerations. So how you can validly administrate it. And of course, today's focus is going to be that early learning setting, and I'm going to give you a couple examples of how we recommend the tool be completed in an early learning setting to be accurate. These considerations are all outlined in the user's guides that you, if you are using these tools, you're going to have a user's guide, and they are all outlined in there. For those of you that don't love to read user's guide, of which I think there's lots of folks, there's also training and available. And with these tools, it's really important that either the information is gleaned from those user's guides and or training is obtained for providers. One of the motivations for participating in this webinar has been some of the errors in administration that we've seen out and about as this tool has been brought into the early learning community, which again, I'm very supportive of. I think it's a wonderful setting for these tools to be completed because of that strong relationship that folks have with parents and caregivers. I think it could be extremely useful information. In terms of the options, we have 4 different ones. Parents can complete it independently. You can send it out to a parent or a caregiver at home and have it come back. Of course, there may be a number of parents that for different reasons that's going to be a challenge for them. Parents or caregivers, the second option there, can also complete it with support from a provider, either support in reading or perhaps the language. There needs to be some interpretation done to complete it. Often parents might need some materials to be able to complete it accurately, and or just some opportunity to observe another person trying it with their child so that they can also try these items with their child. Another option, this is a wonderful option for early learning providers, is for the provider and the parent to complete an ASQ separately, to come together and have a conversation about those. And what we recommend in those cases is to combine those results for one finalized ASQ. Often I'll hear folks talk about the fact that parents may have seen things at home that they are not seeing in the classroom. And there's just a need to acknowledge the fact that kids do things in different settings. And if you haven't seen it yet, as a provider in a classroom setting, you can often negotiate with the parent to say, I haven't seen this yet in the classroom setting. Would it be okay to say we're seeing this sometimes, and I'll just make a note so that I can keep looking for this in the classroom. So sometimes they will negotiate differences in observations that way. The fourth option, and this is one that often early learning providers like to do because of the timelines, and I know how quickly children need to be screened at the beginning of the year. And providers do have a wonderful opportunity to see a lot of a range of a child's development. is that providers, with the parent's consent, can start completing the items on the ASQ-3 that are really easily observed in a classroom setting. That tends to be a lot of items. But they need to get back together with the parent to kind of finalize what they're observing. Maybe check in on things they haven't seen yet in the classroom, to ask parents whether they have observed their child doing those skills. And the other very important piece is to do the overall section with the parent input. The overall section is the last section on an ASQ, and it asks really important developmental questions that potentially, regardless of ASQ scores, they're just yes or no questions, but they often could trigger the need for a referral if it's a red flag answer. So that section really has to be done by parents. It cannot be done by providers, and it is a super critical section for not missing some potential developmental concerns that could come up in early childhood years. So that's the ASQ, and there will be some handouts that are attached to this webinar. One of them is called Frequently Asked Questions for Providers, and it outlines this information there. Secondly, the social emotional version of this tool is very different in the way that it's administered. And the options for administering the ASQ-SE in early learning centers is, one is that the parents complete it independently, again, or they could complete it with some support. But in this case, it's really that a provider would be supporting around literacy or language, but not influencing the parent's answers at all. Or option number 3 is, again, the parent and provider separately complete ASQ-SEs, but with the ASQ-SE, we do not combine results because we recognize the fact that behavior is going to differ in different settings, and there are no right or wrong answers, just the results of seeing how a child is behaving and through the lenses of the parents and providers just really helps inform what would be the most appropriate potential follow-up for that child. Okay, so
Liz, before we get to the state voices, we have a couple of questions in the chat box. Could you give us an example about how you've seen that the tool might be misadministered? Like, give us an example of like an error or something you've seen that's given you concern out in the field.
Okay, so I think probably the biggest one is just taking the parents completely out of the process. And I think, when there are super tight timelines and, folks are stressed about completing these things, I think there's been a number of protocols developed where teachers complete it on their own. And then the second area where sometimes we see some issues is that the screening tool gets completed, and honestly, this is exactly the same. This really parallels the types of concerns that end up happening in health settings, is that the screening gets completed, but there is no follow-up. The screening gets completed, checked off, put in a file, but the follow-up gets missed. And again, with our frequently asked questions, we address some of these concerns. But basically, if you're going to do screening and you're going to talk to parents about their child's development and or behavioral concerns, there really is a need to follow up on those somehow. So providers really need to be able to have support in following up. And not only when it's a concern, but when things are going well too. So that would be one of the second things I've seen is, either follow-up isn't happening or follow-up is not happening universally. So if everything's going okay, parents need to get that message. Looks great, glad everything's going fine, and a system needs to be developed to get that information to them. And if the screening indicates any need for a referral, there also has to be a system in place to get that screening, get that family the resources that they're going to need.
And we can see someone in the chat box mentioned another error that they were seeing was that folks were choosing the wrong form for the families because of the wrong calculation of the birth date. So
Yeah.
that could be something else that you see. Hey,
Yes,
we have someone making a great point in the chat box about they wonder if families are, if there's been an explanation of the difference between screening and ongoing assessment, which informs like the activities in the classroom or what the teacher's working with. I think that is such an important discussion, and that's where I've seen a lot of errors, is that people assume that the screener is to be used over and over as an ongoing assessment, and they aren't doing the ongoing observation protocols to understand the development of the child. But I think that that's such a great point that's been brought up in the chat box about that difference between screening and ongoing assessment. And whether it's explained to parents, providers, and the field within your state. I know that when I was in state government before, we had a lot of work around working with providers around the difference between screening and ongoing assessment. So I think you're onto something there with that comment. And I'm seeing someone else mention in the chat box that the teachers love the calculator and app. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the app has been a wonderful thing. And yeah, the logistics of this tool are something that, again, I think just the fact that Diane Bricker, again, who's a lead author on this tool with Jane Squires, would talk about the fact that, wow, this tool's so simple. What is, why does anyone need training on it? But, again, to do this well, really providers need training, support, and resources to really do this well. And one of the errors, because there's multiple questionnaires, is this issue around potentially giving the wrong questionnaire at the wrong point in time. So the publisher and, along with the authors and developers of these tools have really worked hard to develop some resources to help with implementation. And one of them is an app, and I'll talk more about some resources at the end. But there are apps that can be downloaded for iPhones or Androids. You just go in and look at, I think it's ASQ calculator is what you type in, and it can help with choosing the correct questionnaire, including when children are premature, as well as helping do an average scoring procedure if an item needs to be omitted because it's not appropriate for the parent or for the family's culture or beliefs. So it does.
I was going to ask you, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you if the tool comes in different languages.
It does, and if there are a number of languages now that are available for actually through the publisher. So there's many versions of these tools that are out there that have been translated, but the ones that are currently available through the publisher, I hope I don't get this wrong, but obviously Spanish, Vietnamese, I believe Arabic is available now, Chinese is coming soon. And they're very good adaptations of the tool, not just translations, but a lot of work has been done that has gone into really looking at very good adaptations of items as needed, materials as needed, and forward back translation type work. It's also available in Somalian. The publisher, I think, is listening to this. There's a link to it again in some of the resources that will be provided here at the end of the training. Does that sound good? Shall we move on?
Yes, that sounds great. Please move on. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, there it goes. 100% use of this tool. It's also available in Arabic and French. Yes. Okay. So we're going to hear some examples from some representatives of different states here. Thank you, all of you, for participating. Becky Mercatoris is going to talk about her experience in Pennsylvania. Elise Payard and Lilia Rodriguez are going to talk a little bit about California's system, and Tricia Hughes and Veronica Pechumer, I hope I got that right, Veronica, sorry, are going to talk a little bit about Michigan, especially Help Me Grow, and how that's been working in Michigan. So let's go ahead and get started here with our first question. We're going to start with Becky and have her talk a little bit about, respond to this question: is developmental screening required in licensing or quality initiatives in your state, or is screening recommended as a best practice? Okay. All right, Becky.
Thanks, Liz, and thank you again for offering for Pennsylvania to share our experiences. So in Pennsylvania, our QRIS system, Keystone Stars, actually sits on top of our licensing requirements. So I'm going to speak about the continuum of where we are with developmental screening tools. So in terms of them being required, our child care regulations do require that child service reports be completed for every enrolled child and updated every 6 months. And in lieu of the child service report, programs can choose to use a different screening tool, including ASQ. And what this really is the foundation of programs understanding why developmental screening is important, how to regularly integrate it into their practice, and to understand that it is important enough that their licensing rep, their certification rep, is indeed going to be looking to make sure that this is something that happens for children who are enrolled in this program. And Liz, if you could move to the second slide.
Okay.
Thanks. So, and as programs are fully compliant and as they're Star 1 and they start to move forward in the Keystone Stars program to Stars 2, 3, and 4, what we're really looking for is for programs to start to put a lot of thought into what their policies are around using developmental screening tools. You can see that we do say it needs to happen within 45 days of a child's enrollment. But really the focus here is to start doing that relationship building with families and how providers can take time to, at the very first point of a child's enrollment, start to build that relationship with the family. As you, Liz had spoken about a couple slides earlier, there are lots of options for ways to do this, and we very much encourage providers to identify an option that allows them to start to build that relationship, allows them to have a clear plan for follow-up in place, right? If an additional referral for services is needed, that there's an actual plan that providers follow. Families are very clear on what that plan is, and that families are incredibly involved in the screening process from the beginning.
Thanks, Becky. And
yeah.
We'll move on here and hear from California, from Elise and Lilia.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting us to join today. We are representing WestEd, California Developmental Screening Network, which is administered through the California Department of Education, Early Learning and Care Division. So we support the QRIS system in California around screening and referral. And California their QRIS system is known as Quality Counts California. It includes 10 regions plus tribal. And it was this support was an emphasis on screening was initially developed under Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge funds, and under that a rating matrix was developed and then adapted after the ending of the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge funds. It is a the rating matrix has a scale of 1 to 5. And at the element that pertains to screening, a rating of 3 requires screening, but a rating of 5 requires the ASQ plus the ASQ SE as indicated. On the next slide, you can see the Quality Count California regions. So there are 10 regions throughout California, and you can see Number 10, San Diego is its own county and its own region. And then in the north, we have 9 counties that make up a very diverse and spread out region. So there's a lot of diversity between these regions. The needs, the context for implementing screening is very different. And so that's a snapshot of how the regions are laid out in California. Here's just a snapshot of the rating matrix in California, the current matrix, which under element 2 on the left is developmental and health screenings. And currently you can see at 3 points that a valid and reliable developmental screening tool is required for that rating. And at 5 points that the ASQ and the ASQ SE, if indicated, are to be used. Next slide. So we do have historically some what you could call incentives. Both the California Department of Education, Early Learning and Care Division, as well as First 5, which is a program developed in California at the state level and at the county level through tobacco funds for promotion and prevention activities in birth to 5 and systems building efforts. So under those 2 agencies, ASQ-3 and ASQ SE-2 training of trainers has been periodically provided free of charge to the participants in order to scale up the use of those tools. And certification grants through the Department of Education that would focus funds on developing certification and required elements of the quality count rating matrix can be obtained through local entities. And also local First 5 impact funds can be applied for to support localized training. And First 5 Impact is a large-scale training and technical assistance project funded through First 5 that supports multiple elements of the QRIS. So screening is one component and a relatively smaller component of that project, but it does reach across all of the QRIS elements. And across both those funding sources, the training of trainers has included completion of the certificate and the user's guide.
Thank you. And finally here for this question, we will hear from Tricia and Veronica from Michigan.
Hi, thank you for letting us participate in the webinar. We're excited to be here. We come from a little bit of a different aspect than the other 2 states. We actually are from a local level, Help Me Grow. We're the state affiliate of Help Me Grow, but a lot of our work is on a local level. So we have some information about the state, but we'll mainly talk about our grassroots Help Me Grow work. On the state level, developmental screening is considered best practice. We do have a QRIS system. Developmental screening is not a requirement, but you get points. I believe it's 2 points for an ASQ. It's not even ASQ, it's developmental screening. The ASQ is recommended or accepted, but there's many other screening tools as well. Developmental screening is required for any of our state-funded programming, our home visitation, as well as our state-funded preschool programs. It is, again, developmental screening and not necessarily required by a named tool. However, in Oakland County, and this is where our expertise comes in, is Oakland County is the state affiliate for Help Me Grow, and we have quite a large project in Oakland County. We have 137 partner sites that use the ASQ, and to be part of our Help Me Grow initiative in Oakland County, you do need to use the ASQ, so that is a requirement to be part of one of our partner sites. Since inception, about 2006, we've done about almost, as you can see, 89,000 screens. In 2010. sorry, my dates were wrong. Additionally, so our Help Me Grow, as the state affiliate of Help Me Grow, all of our Help Me Grow sites partner with our Great Start Collaborative in Michigan, and our Great Start Collaboratives are our grassroots early childhood initiatives, and every county in Michigan has a Great Start Collaborative. That Great Start Collaborative writes a strategic plan around the early childhood initiatives they want in their local communities. So Oakland County, one of our goals is universal access to developmental screening, specifically the ASQ. So we are able to use our state funds that we receive through our collaborative dollars to help support and fund ASQ and Help Me Grow. Currently, we have 9 counties that are supporting Help Me Grow in Michigan. All 9 of those counties are also using ASQ developmental screening. It's not a requirement, but it works so well in partnership with Help Me Grow. All of our 9 counties have decided to use the ASQ.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question here is asks, can you describe how your state uses or recommends the use of the ASQ or ASQ-SC screening in those initiatives? So, how is it really being recommended to be used? And we'll start with California for this question.
So again, the Quality California rating metrics awards the highest rating for the use of the ASQ and the ASQ-SE. So historically, support has from both First 5 and CDE have focused on supporting the use of those tools. Although periodicity is not specified, ASQ-SE is indicated as needed, but there's no specific description about what that may be, although we do use training as a guidance to promote recommended practices around administration and referral. As of 2020, there will be a revision that's currently in process, and the revised matrix will indicate guidance for selecting high-quality tools rather than specifying specific tools, and the rating matrix ratings will actually change. And it's not just applying to the screening and health pieces, but across the matrix, there's a revision happening.
Okay, thank you. And Pennsylvania?
Hi. Well, we are very much aligned with California's last bullet, that we do not endorse any one specific screening tool, but what we really want to ensure is that programs have a great list of tools to choose from, and to have support in choosing the tool that's appropriate for the children and families that they serve. And that list does include the ASQ-3 and ASQ-SE, as well as a few others.
Okay, and Michigan?
So Michigan, again, is around those same lines as the other 2 states previously. There are a variety of tools that are accepted, but one of the accepted tools for use is the ASQ or ASQ-SE for the QRIS. They do recommend screening children at least once per year. And then the ASQ is also used as one of the accepted tools for our statewide preschool program. And they are required to screen children within 2 weeks of enrollment. Here in Oakland County, we use it across the systems, again, through the Help Me Grow work. We use the ASQ and the ASQ-SE as that developmental screening tool. Through that, the Oakland County technical assistants provide training and assistance, financial support, and resources to those programs who we partner with. One of those, with the 137 partner sites that was mentioned in the previous slide, we provide on-site training to them, and we also have assistance and resources for them when needed.
Thank you. Okay, our third question is, is your state using these tools, the ASQ or the ASQ-SE, across different sectors, including child care, Head Start, home visiting programs, and different systems, so the early learning and health systems, and also trying to ask a little bit in terms of how are you trying to help facilitate, if you are using them across these different systems, how's it going in terms of trying to combine forces and decrease duplication, those types of things. We're starting here with Michigan.
So in most cases, developmental screening is required, but again, no specific tool is named. ASQ and ASQ SE are used with, again, like I believe all of our 9 counties at this point, but definitely the first 4 Help Me Grow participating counties. We use them across home visitation, child care, our state-funded preschool. Anybody that really works with kids birth to 5, we will partner with and help support that developmental screening. One of the challenges definitely is we do use the Brooks Enterprise system. One of the challenges is definitely that duplication of services, especially as we try to get into one of our goals, and we're continually working toward, is really engaging healthcare providers, specifically family physicians and pediatricians, and how do we support them in our early childhood system. But again, duplication is an issue, and we have an issue we haven't solved. And how do we, because of the requirements around HIPAA laws and FERPA laws, and how do we share information without breaking those laws? It's really quite challenging, so I don't have that answer.
Okay, thank you. Pennsylvania?
Yeah, thank you. So we also have some of those same challenges. One of the areas that I thought I would highlight today actually came out of a recommendation from our Early Childhood Mental Health Advisory Group, who really suggested ensuring that our folks in child welfare also have access to the ASQ tools. So you can see here there are some parameters around who exactly is screened, but we really wanted to make sure that as we think about systems alignment, that we're supporting our partners and having access to the same tools that our early learning programs have, and then also work on that coordination piece around ensuring that we are not duplicating screenings while then simultaneously perhaps missing children who should be screened. So this is really just a highlight of one of our efforts around our children and youth agencies.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that was it. On to California.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. So in California, the ASQ and ASQ are widely used in early learning, health, early Head Start, and in some home visiting programs. With the variety and the size of California, you can imagine that it's very localized in how these tools are used, if they're used, and how they're used contextually. But there is effort across these systems to use these tools and create kind of a seamless, universal experience for families. We have what we call a statewide screening collaborative, which is jointly funded by the California Department of Public Health and the California Department of Developmental Services, Part C IDEA, to address issues and increase collaboration and coordination, specifically in the healthcare, with healthcare providers and offices and clinics. So it is not ASQ, ASQ-SE specific, but in that initiative, QRIS, Quality Counts California, is at the table, and in those conversations, though the collaborative is specifically focused on primary care. And duplication, I echo what the other states have said, that duplication of effort is an ongoing issue. There are some areas that have instituted use of the Learn the Science Act early family passports to help support families communicating with various programs. And a lot of people have wanted to take that to scale and to see if we could come up with something that's statewide that would generally support developmental screening and communication of those results. But again, barriers across systems and data and legal issues, make those challenging problems. I think there's some people feel that there are some sectors of our state where screening is going so well that families are inundated with multiple screenings, and that's a concern. But I think the overarching concern still is that we're under screening, and to focus on making sure that parents are getting captured in a screening system at some point.
Okay. I appreciate all of your thoughts on this particular issue and the duplication. It's a new concern for us, right? After so many years of trying to rev up screening, and as Elise mentioned, there still is room to grow in a number of different areas, but now we have these issues around too many screens, but it's a great tip, this idea of using a passport potentially to share information. And I wanted to thank Becky for highlighting child welfare. I think these tools, it's nice, really nice for foster parents, birth families, as to be able to have access to this information and get grounded in terms of where kids should be at and how to support them. And I know that there's been work, throughout Help Me Grow and different Help Me Grows around that single, potentially being a repository of screening somehow, and having a platform that is HIPAA, FERPA, compliant, but allows, screenings to be shared across different entities. So anyway, it is a challenge. I think it's a good challenge, this duplication piece, and, families hopefully also can say, I've done this before. I'm feeling okay. I really don't feel the need to screen my child because I just did this very recently. So also having options for families to opt out if they have already done this is nice, to develop systems that allow them to opt out if they need to. Okay, so on to our next.
This is Deb. I do think that there are some solutions being innovated. This notion of the unique identifier, people are really exploring that. The use of different platforms that could share with parent approval between a provider, another agency, and a pediatrician, that the screener would be available for all three. There's really quite a bit of innovation going on here. And I think we're seeing some solutions coming through on the horizon in terms of this question. And I liked what you said about passports, and parents opting out, of course, is always, something as well. So I think we're starting to get there in terms of solutions to this very complex question.
Yeah. Thank you, Deb. Okay, and our final question here is, a really important one, is how do we really support these providers? Again, they look very simple, but how do the providers really need support in order to do this process in a way that's going to engage, feel good for families, get them on board, not make them nervous about why it's being done or what's going to be done with the results, but see it as a really positive experience. And so I'd like to start here with Michigan to answer this question.
Great. This is one of the places that I feel like we have a really great strength through Help Me Grow. Our Michigan state level, we do have QRIS, which we have consultants that will provide training and technical assistance. But with our 9 Help Me Grow partners, that's part of Help Me Grow is to provide training and technical assistance around developmental screening. And as I said, all of our Help Me Grow counties use ASQ. Oakland County, we've developed quite a system. We have currently 4 care coordinators that are also technical assistant support. So those care coordinators provide trainings on ASQ, and ASQ SE. They provide training on what to do after the results come in, how to talk to families, where to make referrals. So it's really a well-rounded training that we provide to all of our partners through Help Me Grow. We also train them on how to use the enterprise system so they can run reports for themselves as a partner. We also have a parent information phone line that our care coordinators support, and that's for families. So we have families can go online and do the developmental screening, do the ASQ and send it in. Our care coordinators answer all of those and do the follow-up and talk to all the parents who have responded to those ASQs online. So we have a wealth. One of the things I wanted to talk about here was how we're funded, and because what we provide in Oakland County is not necessarily what's provided across the state. We use what we call our Great Start Collaborative dollars to support the care coordinators to support the ASQ and developmental screening. So that's one of the things that our community has decided is a priority, and that's what we use our funding for. So we do have a robust system of support and training for any of our ASQ partners in Oakland County.
Thank you. And next, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so we have 30 approved instructors that are offering the trainings across the Commonwealth, and then the folks who come and attend do receive the developmental screening tool at no cost. So we very much want to support folks not just in accessing the tool, but also having the professional development they need to ensure that they are using it successfully. We do also have a requirement that our state-funded programs are required to share their screenings and their other observations and assessments with the families on a regular basis. So again, this really loops back to that idea around family engagement and being able to do some really great relationship building work among all of the grown-ups who are supporting the children. And then, of course, we do have, through our Pennsylvania Pre-K Counts, which is our state-funded pre-K program, and our Keystone Stars, our QRIS program, this expectation that parents are very involved in developing the plans, and this acknowledgement, of course, that families are a child's first teacher and really need to be embedded in this work together. So we try to really weave these ideas through multiple pieces and features of the programming, of the professional development that's offered to support providers as they deliver programmatic services, but then also ensure, again, that families are an integral part of the policies and the systems development work that's happening around supporting providers and using these screening tools.
Great, thank you. And lastly here, California.
So California has a multiple-year history of California Department of Education support, first under Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge, dating back to 2011. And then their efforts broadened beyond just the use of the ASQ and the ASQ SE tools. So, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There are these first 5 impact funds that can be used for training. And then our project through WestEd Center for Prevention and Early Intervention is titled the Developmental Screening Network, California Developmental Screening Network. And again, that's funded through CDE. And we provide tiered support at the universal, targeted, and intensive levels for screening, including the ASQ and the ASQ SE. So throughout time, starting back under Race to the Top, the effort was really to get people trained on the tools and then develop a cadre of trainers, so doing training of trainers to develop this cadre or this network of trainers who had the capacity to go back to their local entities and then train others in order to really scale and sustain the work over time. So the DSN is really focused on the idea that beyond the initial training and the capacity as a trainer, those folks as trainers and coaches really need coaching and support to be able to do their job effectively to scale up screening at the local level. So at the universal level, we have a platform, a social network platform that's a closed network for all of our trainers and coaches to be able to join and share resources, post questions. We share ideas with one another. It's an opportunity for one local area to develop a really cool way of doing universal consent so that this information can be shared between agencies and providers and that sort of thing, and share that with other folks. At the targeted level, we have a community of practice that meets every other month, and we have very specific topics that we get from our trainers and coaches about what's the hot topic, what are your burning questions and your burning needs, and we try to develop webinars and conversation for those who attend that support that topic and that need. And then we've just started offering support at the intensive level, which is more individualized to regions. So regions can apply for individualized support around specific goals that align with wherever they are in the implementation of screening and referral, and really receive from us more one-on-one, individualized and specific support that's really tailored to their local needs rather than kind of broad screening issues or broad coaching issues. We really dive down deep into the local system and support them. So, and then we have Help Me Grow California and local entities that provide broad screening system support. It's not ASQ specific, but Help Me Grow and Quality Counts California work together to try to leverage those supports and coordinate supports to scale and sustain the screening systems at the local level.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank all of you for sharing so much great information and lots of interesting strategies for supporting providers. Thanks for sharing all of those. I think now is Debbie. Do we have some questions? Okay.
Yes,
great.
We do have a few questions to consider. We were wondering if the states could talk a little bit about what happens after the screening, or what type of supports are in the state if the screening indicates something additional is needed, like how connected are you with early intervention parts B and part C, and just anything else. We had a question in the chat box about, so the screening isn't just for the parent and caregiver to solve if the results are an indication of, some concern or some developmental delay, or if there isn't a problem afoot. So what's like part B here in terms of what happens within the programs from the state perspective or from Michigan and the county perspective? What happens if there is something indicated as a next step?
So
do you want to start Michigan? Yeah, I was going to say Michigan. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, this is Veronica from Michigan. What we do with ours, we have those care coordinators I was talking about on the last slide. They provide a lot of the follow-up for our ASQ. We're fortunate enough to be in an intermediate school district, so we're honestly 2 cubicles over from our early intervention. So anytime that we have an ASQ that comes up where there maybe needs to be an assessment, we're completely coordinating with our early intervention. If it's a family who's maybe in the gray or has some concerns but not necessarily needs an assessment, we may do some other things with them. We have other services that we connect them in with, such as home visitation services. It might be play groups. Some of our play groups have early intervention people there, so a family can go to a play group and connect with an early intervention specialist, which is a really nice way to gradually talk to them about what's available for them in the system. But we definitely have a lot of connections. Our care coordinator's role is to connect that family into whatever services they need after the follow-up with the ASQ.
California or Pennsylvania, anything you'd like to add there?
Hi, this is Becky from Pennsylvania. I think that one of the challenges that we saw sort of over the years was that there was some uneven follow-up, as you sort of saw some providers who were very diligently doing screenings, and then, as I believe Liz said, sort of filing that away, and then other folks who were really great about taking action on what that next step is. I think from our perspective, one of the pieces that we've really tried to foster and encourage is those local relationships between providers and their local early intervention providers, and really understanding that the state has a role to smooth those state systems, but a lot of this work does happen because people know one another and are connected at the local level. So really we've been focused a lot on encouraging and building those relationships and making sure that our early childhood community is deeply connected with our early intervention community, and understanding how those relationships can smooth those next steps in terms of screenings and any possible referrals and questions back and forth between the two pieces of the system.
That's great, Becky. Thank you. California, anything that you would add in there?
Yeah, we've worked. There's quite a bit of variability, I think, at the local and regional level around capacity and to make referrals, and some of those referrals, of course, are appropriate for Part C, and those tend to be tighter connections than for those kids who maybe fall into the gray area or the monitoring area, which is still a concern, and that's where Help Me Grow has really kind of put a lot of their efforts and really having some prevention and promotion connections. So, making sure, building out both the relationship for Part C early intervention, but also building out those other community resources and partnerships has been kind of a broader emphasis in our state to try to make sure that kind of continuum of need that kids may not be yet eligible for Part C early intervention, but there's still a need for prevention and promotion and getting those kids connected and those families connected to appropriate community resources has been important. I think another area that has been important is that screening collaborative that I referred to, and really trying to bring healthcare providers and early learning and care providers to the table together to try to close the loop on communication between those systems. And that's been, and so sometimes referrals are not, that loop is not as tight as providers and the health system would like, or at the early learning level would like. So, working on that relationship is kind of an ongoing, both at the agency level and at the provider level and local entities, is kind of a continuum of need and focus in our state.
One final question for the states before we turn to Liz, we have a couple of people wanting to know more about the ASQ online tool when you get to resources. But before we go to that, have any of the 3 states tried anything with the universal ID question, like just in general to understand the services that children have gotten prior to school age? Are any of you working on that or have worked on that? That's a pretty big question, but I'm just going to ask anyway.
This is California, and I can say, we are a long way from that realization, but there is a lot of interest and a lot of collaboration and conversation happening around, looking at a more robust data system and identifiers and communication across systems, and really building out robust data so that we can make sense of what's happening, a better sense of what's happening, and follow kids and understand better outcomes. And we are a long way from that, but there's certainly a lot of interest and a lot of talk from a lot of different sectors.
This is Veronica from Michigan. I would second what she was saying is there's conversations, but we're a long way from making any of it happen.
This is Becky from Pennsylvania. So we are fortunate in that we have pretty robust IT systems. We do have something called a master client index number that does talk across systems in our Department of Human Services, and then does indeed connect to our Department of Education, so we can start to understand children's experiences as they sort of come into the system from 0 to 5, and then as they transition forward. I think that that's just as complicated as everyone on the phone probably understands it to be, and how things that work really smoothly on paper sometimes are still pretty complicated when you have a lot of users putting data in and being able to ensure that there's a match and every piece is in place. But that is one place that we really are trying to understand how we can better use our information to know where kids are in the system and how we can start to connect some of these pieces together as children move forward, including some, maybe more non-traditional pieces of information around, billing that comes in through CHIP and different sort of different understanding of where that might be. But it's still definitely a place where we're excited to keep talking and growing and thinking about how we use that system.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that conversation. Thanks to all of you. Liz, why don't we go ahead with resources, and then if we have other questions, we can come back. So let's let you take it again.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so just to keep in mind that what we're trying to do here is really make a rich service out of screening, and that the simplicity of these tools can be deceptive in terms of what's needed to really do it in a quality way. Training and coaching are keys to quality administration of these tools, developing a cadre of trainers within states or locales who can really share the information about how this should be done in early learning settings is super important. And again, as we're all just sharing, the follow-up is really critical in helping providers. I really think about different roles in the screening process, and really the provider's role is to engage the families, with that relationship they have, and really help gather quality information, both from the parents as well as the observations and information they have to share. And then they need support developing those follow-up systems, and to keep them very simple. Here's, your early intervention, early childhood special education partners. Here's Help Me Grow. If you have the luxury of a 211 number or some, simple place to go after screening with this information to know what the next potential steps are. So helping think that through at a system level is really key. And that there's some simple tools and training that are available to help with this ongoing information about quality screenings. The publisher of these tools, Brooks Publishing, has a wonderful website that they've been supporting. It's called agesandstages.com. You can certainly go there to purchase products, but and there's another website, Brooks Publishing. Both of these are referenced at the end. But this one, agesandstages.com, just has an enormous amount of rich resources that help in implementation and help you get to understand the tool, introduce it to families, and whatnot. You can see on this slide in the bottom right, there's an age calculator online in addition to the apps that can be downloaded for free. But I would just really encourage folks to go here and see everything that they've been pulling together that have been developed in terms of webinars and information for healthcare providers and information for early learning providers to use in implementation. It's just a super rich resource. These are just some examples of free resources that providers may find useful. You know, how does it work? How do I help parents complete it? There's a whole toolkit for early childhood programs and really early learning programs about how to use these tools. And so that's a really nice number of resources for providers. And then a whole nother level of resources that providers can use with parents to engage them in this process. Very important, you know, what is the ASQ-3? Just what is this thing? You know, you can staple that to the front of a questionnaire, and then you can kind of understand what screening is versus maybe, you know, as we were talking about earlier, what ongoing assessment is. So what is the purpose? Why are we doing this right here, right now within the, you know, context? But the publisher has made these very attractive handouts. And also, they have a series of activities here that they've made. You know, these are available. All of these resources are actually in the user's guides as well, but what the publisher has done is made them just more attractive to share with families, both in English as well as in Spanish. So you can find those on this website. Then there's also additional resources that are available for purchase. You know, some of the ones that work well in early learning are the learning activities where, you know, both families can use these types of activities at home as well as providers. Some providers, depending on what they're doing, at which level of implementation they're at, may find good resources there too. And then those are some of the just pictures of some of the training DVDs that are available. Okay, so that's kind of it in terms of resources. And again, I just wanted to share the fact that there will be these handouts that are posted that have frequently asked questions answered for administrators, frequently asked questions that are answered for providers in early learning settings. And then it has a couple pages of links that kind of go straight to this agesandstages.com website for administrators and providers that kind of direct you to what, you know, we are thinking might be the most useful resources in terms of implementation. So you can kind of get to those resources really quickly.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. Well, I'd like to go to each of our state partners in this session and ask them about a closing thought. Like, what would you say to people on the session today or those that are thinking about how to make a developmental screening part of their work in early learning and across the sectors and across the systems? What would you share with us as a final comment? Michigan, do you want to go ahead and start us off here?
Sure, this is Veronica again. I think one of the final thoughts is I'm sort of reading some of the questions as well is it's important, there's some questions about parental consent, and I think one of the most important things that we try to do with the ASQ is not only have the parental consent, but also make sure that we have follow-up for these parents, that they're not just doing a screening and it's just sitting somewhere. That if they need follow-up and assessment, that we're making sure we're connecting them to that we're training all of our ASQ partners on how to do some of those follow-up activities, how to adjust their classrooms so that they can fit the needs of the kids, and really using the ASQ as more of a live document than just a screening that gets filed away. So I think as if you're building out your developmental screening, really look at what you're doing with that follow-up.
That's great. Thank you. Becky?
Yeah, I think I would echo that we have a real opportunity to think about follow-up. I keep circling back to this idea about how deeply all of this work is rooted in family engagement and building relationships between early learning providers and the children and the families who they serve. And I do think we have a real opportunity to think about that from a systems level perspective as we set up our pieces that really both support children through this sound developmental screening practice, but also really supporting providers in their access to professional development and their professional understanding around again, the difference between developmental screening and ongoing assessment, and really ensuring that we have the right tools in place for everyone to really be successful in this practice.
Thank you. In California?
Yeah, this is just kind of making me reflect on, I think the process of family engagement and meeting families where they are to kind of have warm handoffs and warm introductions to resources is an ongoing challenge and a real skill for our providers. And part of that is, I think, really coming to such a saturation of knowledge of screening in our community that it's normalized and that parents are expecting and wanting that kind of interaction. And I think it helps when we get to that place where parents are, asking for screening and they're asking for resources, it helps then providers have a more comfortable conversation. So I think my hope in supporting these systems to grow and sustain is that we get a culture in which those conversations come more easily because parents are demanding screening and providers are there ready to help lead them through the next process.
Lilia, would you like to respond? And what are your thoughts around this topic?
I think it's great that we're thinking of the family engagement as often that's the opening door to get the families to trust the screening process and to accept services, as the opening door into getting the families into the services that they need.
Yes. Well, thank you. And Liz, what would you say in closing?
I guess just that, to let folks know that I have some information and I'm happy to talk to folks. I think all of us who work on this project really want to support the early learning community to be able to do this well, and happy to share time thinking through systems and to just know there's resources out there, both training as well as a lot of us who do training in TA really want to share what we know about how to do this really accurately and well within early learning communities, so to feel free to reach out.
Well, I'd like to thank our panel so much for sharing your great ideas and thinking about how you're building systems and building developmental screening into the system. It's just been very interesting to hear the approach each of you has taken. To our participants in the session today, I'd like to encourage you to say a few words when the message pops up about how did the webinar go. Provide feedback and share with us ideas for future topics. If you have something in mind that you'd like a Let's Talk session about, these conversations are driven by leaders in the field and people that have a question or want to hear about state work. So thank you so much to everyone for joining in today, and look forward to seeing you on the next Let's Talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
Rating, clique ahí y los empieza a hacer. Okay. Y ya cuando